All right, guys, so Netanyahu spoke at Congress today, and it was a shit show. It was absolutely horrific. So I'm going to walk you through what happened throughout the day. There's plenty of things to be pissed off about. So first of all, let me give you a good piece of news. It got to the point where about half of Democrats in the House and in the Senate said, I'm not going. So that's actually more than I would have expected, right? Like, most of the Democrats take money from AIPAC or DMFI. I mean, all the Republicans do except like Thomas Massie. But, you know, maybe 80, 90% of Democrats take that money, so I would have assumed that they would all show up. Well, it turns out, no. Netanyahu has now become such a partisan lightning rod, as in he's like aligning himself with Republicans so much that Democrats now feel free to sort of put their middle finger up to him and say, this guy doesn't deserve my time. Okay, so like I said, about half of the Democrats in the House and in the Senate decided not to go. Some Democrats walked out on him during the speech. There was a Democrat who, as soon as the speech was over, released a statement calling for Netanyahu to resign. Even Nancy Pelosi came out and said that was like the worst speech ever given by a foreign leader in the United States, something to that effect. So that's like the surprising good news. The other thing that I consider good news is the massive backlash in terms of the protests, where people were going inski, man. There was a lot of people in the streets of D.C. in multiple different places. We're going to get to the scandals around that in just a second. But all right, so when Netanyahu goes to speak, Mike Johnson introduces Netanyahu as His Excellency. Now, he also got a really long standing ovation. The Congress people who were there looked like they were seeing an A-list celebrity and they were excited. He got a bunch of applause breaks in the midst of his disgusting speech. All right, so what was the gist of his speech? It's exactly what you would expect. There was one point in the speech. Can you imagine the hubris of this guy's? One point in the speech where he prods Congress like, hey man, you guys got to give us the weapons faster. Dude, you are in the midst of doing a genocide. According to The Lancet, the medical journal, you've killed 186,000 Palestinians. The reports are it's like 90% innocent civilians. You've been killing women and children. You've been bombing hospitals and schools and every kind of civilian infrastructure under the sun. And he goes in there, arrogant as ever, I should say. And he's like, you guys better hurry up with those weapons, bro. Like, what am I watching? This is my government. I pay taxes to this government. They take my money and your money and they send it to Israel and send them weapons so they can carpet bomb more toddlers. What are we doing here? So that was one part. Another part was he tells a story about Rafah and a mission that was done there. And he says, we killed practically no civilians in Rafah. Now, even though he was talking about a specific instance in Rafah, the impression he was trying to give people is like, shut up worrying about civilians. Civilians are not getting killed. It's not true. So he's trying to tell you that when 186,000 Palestinians are dead and like 90% of them are innocent civilians, don't worry, we're not actually killing any civilians. Like, he must think we're all idiots. The number of stories I've had to cover of like kids getting blown up, a girl with her jaw hanging off, kids getting their arm or their leg amputated with no anesthesia whatsoever, a shortage of medicine and food and water and people starving to death, every kind of civilian infrastructure imaginable that was bombed. On video, us seeing kids walking down a dirt path and getting bombed, people showing up to try to get some of the little food that there is and getting bombed in the process of that, the IDF soldiers putting on Palestinian women's lingerie and taking photos that they think are funny wearing it. I mean, this is unconscionable. So he tries to explain, like, no, we're actually not even killing any civilians. At one point, he obviously stole this line from somebody, but he says that gays for Gaza is like saying chickens for KFC. Which, again, I can't stand how low IQ the whole conversation is around this, because you can be in favor of gay rights and also not want to commit a genocide. You don't get to say our genocide is justified because they're bad on gay rights. That's not a thing. And also, by the way, it's hilarious when Israel portrays themselves as this beacon of liberal, enlightened civilization, because they don't even allow gay marriage there. So for them to hide behind gays as if like, what, we treat them better than they're treated in Gaza, therefore now we get to kill your kids? Like, what are we talking about here? He also told multiple completely fake, debunked stories from October 7th. There's been endless reporting on the specific instances coming out of October 7th. Originally, they said there was beheaded babies and there's babies in an oven and all these things that later on come to find out not true. There was mass systemic rape. Turns out that's not true. There was, again, a lot of mainstream outlets eventually started telling the truth on these things. In the heat of the moment, don't get me wrong, October 7th was horrible and a lot of civilians were killed, and that's bad. But they felt the need to exaggerate and use hyperbole and lie in order to get people to shut their brains off and say, do whatever you want in retaliation because these are not people. These are not humans. These are beasts. So just go after them. Go after their families. Just wipe them all out. And that was the goal of that wartime propaganda, and it worked on a lot of people. Netanyahu also said that protesters should be ashamed of themselves. The anti-genocide protesters, who are heroes, by the way, he says they should be ashamed of themselves. He accused the protesters of being funded by Iran with, of course, zero evidence. Why? He made it up. We know he made it up. There's zero evidence for that. I know a lot of pro-Palestine protesters. Literally none of them have a connection to Iran, are paid by Iran. It's just a smear. It's like saying in the lead up to the Iraq War that if you're protesting the Iraq War, that they're funded by Saddam Hussein. Oh, are they? Are they? Then he also said, this part is particularly nefarious. He said that Iran tried to have Trump assassinated. So, in other words, what he's trying to do is prod the U.S. to go to war with Iran, which, everybody knows Netanyahu's wanted war with Iran forever. But he wants the U.S. to do the dirty work. He wants the U.S. to actually wage the war. And so he comes to the people's house and says, Iran tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Now, of course, this guy is possibly going to be the next president. He might even be the favorite to be the next president. And you're telling that guy, yeah, Iran tried to assassinate you. Gee, I wonder what he's trying to do there. Can't be that he's trying to prod him to go to war on behalf of him. I can't, man. I can't. It's just everything was so dishonest. It was lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. So it was disgusting. Everybody who went there and clapped should feel ashamed. This will be viewed through the lens of history as total Nazi apologists. I mean, this guy is the modern day Adolf Hitler. And we had some of our Congress people were there cheering him on, acting like he was telling the truth and keeping it real and just a good guy delivering a good speech. It was absolutely pathetic. All right, so now let's talk about some of the backlash. So, man, I love Rashida Tlaib so much. She showed up. Now, I would have thought that she would protest it like many other Democrats did. But no, it turns out she showed up. But she had the balls to show up with two signs. One said war criminal, and the other one said guilty of genocide. And she would hold them up as he was talking. And as many people pointed out, it reminds me of that very famous picture out of Nazi Germany where everybody in the crowd is doing the Hitler salute. And there's one guy in the crowd standing there like this, defiantly, basically being like, I'm not a sheep. You guys are morons. You guys are savages. I'm not on board with this. Fuck this. And that guy now historically is looked at as like, holy shit, the ball's on that guy. What a G. And that's when I was looking at Rashida Tlaib sitting there defiantly holding up the sign. I was like, man, she's surrounded by a bunch of disgusting, immoral, decrepit freaks. And she's showing backbone, showing spine, showing everybody what true moral and ethical leadership looks like. So massive, massive credit to her. I mean, that's going to go down in the history books, what she was doing there. And the crazy thing is I saw her getting so much shit. There were people on Twitter saying she's Iran's puppet. Like, no, she's not. You're Israel's puppet. People saying, whatever, she should leave the country, or she's a terrorist apologist, or what. It's like, you guys are all beyond grotesque, man. So massive credit to Rashida Tlaib for that. Now, there were protesters all over D.C., and initially they tried to block Netanyahu's path. Credit to them for that. That's something I had brought up early on when we learned he was coming to speak. I said, I hope people block him. And he can't even get to the Capitol to give the speech. Well, obviously he was able to get to the Capitol to give the speech, but people tried. People tried to block his path. Now, This, of course, what I'm about to tell you, this is what the right has been hyper-focusing on. Not the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu lied relentlessly. Not the fact that he said, basically, we killed no civilians, which, again, is a total lie. Not the fact that he said, U.S. protesters, Americans, are funded by Iran. That's a lie. Not the fact that he was prodding us to go to war with Iran by saying Iran tried to assassinate Trump. The conservatives are focusing on none of those things. The America First people are okay with a foreign leader coming in here and disrespecting our protesters, disrespecting freedom of speech, lying about our own people. They're fine with all of it. They're fine with this guy prodding us to try to go to war with Iran. Again, what happened to America First? I thought you were America First. They were all focusing on what happened at some of these protests. So at these protests, in one instance, they pulled down an American flag that was flying, and they put up a Palestinian flag in its place. They also burned the American flag. And of course, now you get the same fucking stupid-ass dialogue we get every year, every other year, where right-wingers are saying, what should the punishment be for burning the flag? Shouldn't this be illegal? This is horrible. Get out of the country if you don't want to be in the country. All the stupid, dumbass bullshit you've heard over and over and over and over and over. Guys, I genuinely don't think they even know that the Supreme Court has heard a case on this, and they ruled, even the conservatives on the court ruled, yeah, you might not like burning a flag, but it's free speech. This obviously falls directly in line with freedom of speech. This is perfectly allowed. You might not like it, but that's what it is. Trump, when he was president, was saying, oh, we should punish flag burning with up to a year in jail. What? The same people who pretend like they're the most pro-Constitution, the most pro-First Amendment and free speech, they're the ones to throw it out immediately the second they get their fifis hurt. So, look, let me ask you, what is the appropriate way to protest modern-day Adolf Hitler coming to our country and playing footsies and snuggling up with our elected representatives? What's the appropriate way to protest him? Oh, wait. The reality is they don't want anybody to protest him in any way, shape, or form because they agree with him, because they like him. So that was a part that was viewed as, scandalous on the right. They were whining and crying and bitching and moaning and shitting themselves because American flags were burned and Palestinian flags were put up. Also, at some of these protests, they burned Netanyahu in effigy. And they did a bunch of graffiti in different places. At Union Station in D.C., there was a bunch of graffiti. They're showing this picture of this like Liberty Bell knockoff that graffiti was put on it, and conservatives are acting like it's the actual original Liberty Bell. It's not. It's just some fucking knockoff statue, which, by the way, the graffiti can be fucking cleaned off of it, just like the graffiti can be cleaned off of all the walls and the monuments that they did graffiti on. And again, they're acting like this is the end of the fucking world. They're acting like this is the end of the world. They're more angry about the graffiti. They're more angry about an American flag being burned. They're more angry about Netanyahu being burned in effigy. And it's like, you do realize the whole point of these protests is to say, stop sending U.S. money, stop sending U.S. weapons to carpet bomb toddlers and babies and women. Like, I don't want to kill any more civilians. 186,000 is enough. We're done here. No more bombing hospitals, no more bombing schools, no more bombing, all the civilian infrastructure in Gaza. No more starving the population. No more literal fucking torture concentration camps where you got horror stories coming out of there about Palestinians being raped with hot iron rods and dying in the process. This is what these people are protesting. The right has fucking nothing to say about any of those actual atrocities. And what are they mad about? They're mad about the protest. They're mad about the symbolism in the protest. And I've had enough, man. I'm sick of these people. They're not engaging in good faith here. They're not. They understand that genocide is a much worse thing than a protest that hurts your feelings, burning a flag. They understand that. So I can't. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. I literally don't know what to do with these people anymore. So anyway, that's your breakdown of what happened. And what they'll do now is they will do their best to find the most egregious examples in the protests and then make the entire conversation about that, right? So I already saw there's one example of, and I don't even know if this picture is actually from these protests. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but one person had some Hamas flag. And so now all the conversation will be about, oh my God. And what they'll do is they will smear the entire protest movement now as being pro-Hamas, even though they're not. They will smear that you're all pro-Hamas or you're all pro-terrorist. You guys were literally just clapping for a terrorist. You guys just, heard a terrorist give a speech and we're praising him to the high heavens. But they'll do that. One other thing I saw is there was in the graffiti, most of the graffiti is exactly what you would expect. It's like free Palestine, free Gaza, things of that nature. And there was one person that wrote like Hamas is coming or something like that. Again, they'll focus on that. Now, to be clear, should the person have brought the Hamas flag? Of course not. I'm anti-Hamas. Call me crazy. Should the person have written Hamas is coming? No. But guys, understand this is going to be used now as the red herring. The entire conversation will be about that. Will be about, look at these thug gangster protesters. They don't want peace. They're terrorist apologists. That's what they'll talk about. And they will totally shut down the conversation from where the focus should be, which is a thug, gangster, foreign leader authoritarian came into our country, told us, hey, give me more money and more weapons and let me kill whoever I want. Shut the fuck up. And he lied relentlessly to our faces saying, actually, we haven't even killed any civilians. I don't know what you're talking about. But by the way, your American protesters are funded by Iran, and Iran tried to kill President Trump. So just remember that, because what I'm going to want you to do is go to war with them for me. Disgusting. Disgusting. Having Netanyahu come and speak is on par with having like Putin coming to speak, right? Like I said, he's modern day Adolf Hitler. Like, why is it we grant this giant exception for Israel? They get to violate every single international law. They get to disregard human rights completely. And we still pretend like we're this moral beacon for the world as we back one of the most extreme regimes. I mean, apartheid state, you name it. How many times have we gone through this? I just can't, man. All right, I'm gonna wrap this video up because my brain's not functioning very well anymore. It's late, I'm tired, but I had to rant a little bit about what went on today because it's just, honestly, it's up there in terms of how disgusted I am with this country. It's up there with the day that we learned about Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib and the torture. It's up there with George W. Bush lying to us about weapons of mass destruction and us learning that it was a lie. It's up there with the worst of the worst because in no sane timeline should we have this guy here being celebrated, treated like royalty. He should be in prison. He should be in prison. Arrest Netanyahu. Arrest him. Arrest him. I mean, it's that simple. That's the only logical thing to do. That's it. That's all there is. Arrest him. Sanction Israel. Have every single country in the world get them together and say we're going to cut off economic ties with Israel. Isolate them. Make it so they don't have a choice but to move towards peace. You can't. They're not going to do it internally. They just passed. They just voted on it the other day and said no two-state solution. We're against a two-state solution. It was like only 9 people were in favor of it. The overwhelming majority were against it. They were against a two-state solution. So, I mean, they're telling you they don't want peace. What are you going to do with that information? Just pretend like they do? Pretend like he didn't lie to your face repeatedly when he was giving his speech? Pretend like he didn't disrespect this country? I can't. Anyway, I'm gone. This was one of the worst days.